Coming up on this edition of Two Right Turns, our guest is Clemson Athletic Hall of Famer Tim Bourret. The man known as Clemson Google talks about that nickname, his memories of more than 40 years working with Clemson Athletics, and we talk about the statistical anomaly that is William Perry punt returns. This episode of Two Right Turns starts now.
They take those two right turns, and when they make the final turn, they can begin to hear the crowd and the noise of the open end of the stadium.
Here it is, the most exciting 25 seconds in college football.
Hello, everybody, and welcome inside Studio C, the Clemson Athletics Branding Institute, for another episode of Two Right Turns, a Clemson football podcast. My name is Ross Taylor, your host for this episode, but our special guest today is, I guess, known presently by the IRS as a golf statistician for NBC Sports, but is known better to our audience as Clemson Google, as SID Emeritus, and as one of the foremost historians of all things Clemson athletics. He is Tim Bourret. Tim, welcome.
Great to be with you, Ross. I've seen many of these episodes, and glad to be on.
Yeah, getting a little bit of behind the scenes in Studio C here today, which is maybe a little bit different format, different space than athletes and coaches may have enjoyed in some of your time here. But I want to talk to you about your journey to Clemson because I know the story, I've heard the story, but for you and someone who has become so synonymous with this university, this athletic department, and this football program, for a young man from Connecticut to be so closely tied to this historic program here in South Carolina, how did it all happen?
Well, my interest in sports goes back to when I was growing up, and my father and I would listen to Notre Dame games on the radio, and he taught me how to keep stats, and so I was always into the stats aspect of it. Then I went to school at Notre Dame. Didn't know sports information jobs for students existed my first 2 years. Then my father happened to meet Roger Valdesari, the legendary SID at Notre Dame, and he told him about that he has students that work for him. And so I applied for a job and got that, and worked in the Notre Dame office for 3 years, including my graduate school year. And so at the end of the 77-78 academic year, I started applying for jobs in sports information, and I was fortunate that Clemson job opened here when Al Adams left being Mr. Bradley's assistant to start the Orange and White publication. And so I applied for the job here, and I had a pretty good resume. My last year at Notre Dame won the national championship in football, went to the Final Four in basketball, so met a lot of people, a lot of media people, and fortunately Mr. Bradley hired me, and then started here September 1st, 1978.
Well, and this is one of my favorite kind of small world things. At the time you enrolled at Notre Dame, how many times had Notre Dame ever played at Clemson?
That would be zero, and so when I did have talk about God working in mysterious ways. So the first time Notre Dame ever played Clemson in football was 1977, as a lot of Clemson fans know, and so I did not usually travel on plane trips with the Notre Dame team. I was a grad assistant in those days. It was just Mr. Valdesari and one assistant, Bob Best, and I was the only grad assistant. So I did have a lot of very good responsibilities. Well, the Monday prior to the Clemson Notre Dame game, Bob Best, who was the assistant, came into the back office where I was, and he says, I'm behind getting the basketball guide done. You're going to Clemson. And I said, sure, that's great. That sounds terrific. So I got to travel, fly down with the Notre Dame team, and experience Clemson like it obviously probably had never been before as far as being fired up for a game. I tell the story that when on Saturday morning of the game, it was a 1 o'clock game, not live television, had the replay network that Notre Dame had with Lindsey Nelson, but there was no live television. So the bus pulled in to the stadium. In those days, they opened the fence for the visiting team bus, and you drove right next to the visiting locker room. So you could look out onto the field, and you could see the hill. Well, 11:15, the hill was absolutely packed. This is an hour and 45 minutes before the game. And so Roger Valdesari, I was sitting next to him, and he looked at me, and he said, what are we doing here? Meaning we're going to get ambushed. At this point, Notre Dame was fifth in the country, had a chance to win the national championship. And so we knew we were going to see a fired-up Clemson crowd, and I got to see Clemson at its best that day.
So before you were ever a part of it, what were your first impressions of this place?
Going back to when I was in college, I really didn't know much about Clemson football. I knew a lot more about Tree Rollins than I did about Clemson football. But that certainly gave me a great impression of Clemson and how rabid the fans are, how important the sports were to the institution. So I really could see it that day.
Well, it's great, too. For being two very different universities, these are two places where football is just ingrained in the culture, and it's so great to see that in the coming years, just the home-and-home series, that these two great programs will continue to be able to face one another and do so in two of the great venues in college football.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, one of the interesting facts about the series is the visiting team won each of the first two games in those home environments. But yeah, I'm very excited about it. Obviously, I think it's going to be a great series over a long period of time, over 12 years. So I'm certainly really looking forward to it. The games that have been played so far in the series have been terrific.
Fantastic. Yeah. So I don't want to take for granted that our audience knows your full background. I mean, you talked about how you got to Clemson, but for those who don't know, who may only know you as a great Twitter follow or as the voice they hear on the radio for football and basketball, tell folks about what your role was here for 40 years.
Right. So I came in 1978 as Mr. Bradley's assistant. I assisted him with football. My main thing was basketball. I traveled with basketball everywhere. I actually didn't travel with football to every single road game until 1982 when I started doing the games on the radio. I went to a lot of the road games, but Mr. Bradley was the primary contact with football. But then in 1982, when I started to travel with to all the games, and my role in football kind of increased, and it increased as much as anything because the program got better and better, and you know what the demands are when you have a top 10 program, and we became a top 10 program in the 1980s. Actually finished the decade as the fifth winningest program in college football in that decade. So I became more and more involved with that. I was the editor of the football program, took up a lot of my responsibility. Show the way things were done in those days. As the editor, I used to have to drive to Columbia every Tuesday to proof the program because there was no such as things.
Nobody was sending
PDFs or page proofs or anything. That was the best way to do it. So I get up early on Tuesday morning, drive down and proof the program, and then get back by about 7 o'clock at night. But I obviously continued to be the SID for basketball and really kind of oversaw the whole operation, for certainly a number of years. And then Mr. Bradley retired in 1989, and then I took over his position. And when I did that, I had to come off the radio because in those days you couldn't be the SID and do color for football, but I could still do the color for basketball. So yeah, actually this year's going to be my 49th year coming up doing color on Clemson basketball. So I really enjoyed that.
We've got a couple of deans in the ACC, both in broadcasting and head coaching in Clemson's men's basketball program.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're 100% right.
So one of the reasons we wanted to have you on now is, for 40 years you were promoting others and you were on the award and dinner circuit. In the last couple of years, you've been making the circuit yourself. I know you won't talk about any of your own accolades, but I'm paid to promote others just like you were for 4 decades. So a 2025 Clemson Athletic Hall of Fame inductee, and most recently 2026 State of South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame inductee. You and I were of like mindset. We didn't get in this business to promote or talk about ourselves, but it obviously can be very validating when you receive something like that. What has it been like for you being the recipient of these honors rather than one nominating someone else?
Yeah, it's been terrific, and one thing I was able to do this year with the South Carolina Hall of Fame, I was just the third sports information director to be inducted, and it gave me the opportunity to tell people about Mr. Bradley and all that he accomplished. And he was the first sports information director to go in, and then Tom Price, his contemporary from South Carolina, also was inducted, and so it's given me the opportunity to tell the impact that those men had. I mean, obviously Mr. Bradley by far the most, because I was his understudy for many years and just learned so many things from him, and so that's been terrific. The Clemson Hall of Fame, obviously, was great to go into so many. To go into the same hall with so many student athletes and coaches that I promoted. And in 2018, I got into the National Sports Information Directors Hall of Fame, and so that certainly meant a lot to me also, having been in the business for so long.
So I have to ask you about the nickname. You know, everybody refers to you as Clemson Google. Obviously, it couldn't have been the case at the start of your career, so I have to imagine it's a more recent invention of the nickname. When was the first time you remember hearing it, and are you a fan of the nickname?
Oh, yeah. No, I get a kick out of it. But it was the brainchild of Dan Scott, who for many years broadcast Clemson baseball. He had a local talk show here on WCCP. And, I used to call into his show and, when there were big events certainly going on. And then, when there was some kind of, and it's still today when somebody in WCCP, one of the announcers will throw out what they call a bat signal about some question they want an answer to. And so I usually try to text him an answer, or I'd call into Dan and give him the rundown or something that happened historically. So he's actually the one who came up with it. I think we were actually broadcasting a baseball game together. He did the games, the Clemson baseball games, about 10 or 12 years ago, and so I think that's where it started.
Probably have to settle for being Clemson Chat GPT for a new generation. I think you might trump me on that one. As we sit here today, we sit at the home of Clemson football, 3-time national champions, but when you arrived here, Clemson was still striving for its first. And I want to know your memories of that 1981 season and your memories of that New Year's Day night in Miami.
So that I came to Clemson at a great time. Obviously, from 1960 to 1976, Clemson didn't even go to a bowl game. And so in the 77 season, when I was still at Notre Dame, had really a very good season, finishing the top 20 of the AP poll for the first time since 1959, and then there were so many players that were coming back for the 78 season, so that was my first season. If you look in the Ring of Honor today, Steve Fuller was quarterback of that team. Jerry Butler was the top wide receiver. Jeff Davis was a freshman linebacker. Terry Kennard was a freshman free safety, so had some great players. And that 78 team kind of set the standard that led to recruiting of some other outstanding athletes that came in 1981. So at the end of the 1980 season, we had a landmark 27-6 victory over South Carolina. They had George Rogers, who would win the Heisman Trophy that year. It just seemed that victory carried over. We did not go to a bowl game at the end of the 1980 season. And though I got to tell a little bit of inside story, I remember after the game, getting a call in the press box, and it was from somebody from a bowl game who was interested in offering Clemson a bowl game. I gave him Mr. McClellan's number, and I believe what happened was Mr. McClellan was smart enough to know that this is a great way to end the season. We got all the momentum of the world. We've got 20 starters coming back for next year, and so they decided not to go. Wow! And so I thought it ended up being a very smart move, because, as I said, all kind of momentum took place towards the next season. But when we started that year, didn't get a single point in the AP or UPI poll, even though we had all those terrific players coming back. But certainly got the season off to a decent start. The first game of the season, we ended up playing Wofford. We were supposed to play Villanova, but they dropped football, so we had to add Wofford in the middle of the summer, who was a Division III team. And at the end of the first quarter, we were losing. Think of the prop bets they have today about what you could get with Clemson winning the national championship after losing the first quarter to Wofford. And it was a close game at Tulane. The next game, we only won 13-5, and you kind of wondered where the offense was going to be. But then everything changed on September the 19th, 1981, when Georgia came to town, and they were the defending national champions. And, the stadium only held 60,000 people then, 63,000, whatever. And but that's as loud as I can remember the stadium being that day. It was just such an electric atmosphere. The defense was terrific, forced 9 turnovers, I believe, which is still the single game record. And we won the game 13-3, and we just seemed to progress up the polls from there.
So what was the moment when you kind of thought like, oh, this is happening? Was it that Georgia game? Was it the Pitt-Penn State game later in the year? Was it like when was it North Carolina?
Right.
Like what was the moment like, no, we got a shot at this?
Yeah, probably. Now you got to remember, obviously, there's no playoffs and where we were in the standings. And if Pitt hadn't beaten Penn State, I don't know that we'd have gotten into the Orange Bowl or got to the point where we were going to play a bowl game for the national championship. So if you look at it from that standpoint, maybe that was the key on a day when Clemson didn't even play. But now when we beat North Carolina in early November of 1981, that kind of gave you more of a feeling that we certainly had a chance. Again, we won 10-8, and at the end of the game, Jeff Bryant recovered a backwards lateral pass that he was the only one who understood that that's what it was.
Yeah.
We won the game 10-8, and the greatest newspaper headline I can remember in this area, the Greenville News, had Tigers are 10-8 just with 10-8 CIOUS in the headline. So then the Pitt-Penn State game took place on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And, I remember watching that game, and that's why every time Todd Blackledge would come back to campus, I always kidded that we should have given him a national championship ring because he was the quarterback for Penn State that led them to that upset of a number one ranked Pittsburgh team. But now, truth be told, I did not attend the national championship game because it's still in those days my priority was with basketball, and the basketball team had a game the next day in Raleigh. So I was not there. I watched the game in Raleigh. So I did not get to experience that, but it was certainly I played a big role in everything, all the game notes and all the bowl guide and everything like that. So I felt a big part of it.
Well, and I'm sure having not been there in January of 1982 probably made Tampa in January of 2017 that much sweeter.
It sure did, yeah. And obviously I'd done a lot with the 81 team, but not experiencing that game. And then, of course, the way the national championship game ended in January the 9th, 2017, that was certainly a special. Quick fact to throw at you, which is probably Clemson might be the only school in the country that its first win ever over the number one ranked team in basketball took place on January the 9th, 1980, when we beat Duke. And then our first win over the number one team in football was that Alabama game on January the 9th, 2017. So both were on January the 9th.
You can't have Tim Bourret on and not get a good nugget like that. Like I feel like you've now met your contractual obligation. Talking about that 1981 team, obviously our current head coach is such a force of personality, but I'm curious to know what it was like working with Danny Ford. And I'm also curious, in my previous life, having worked with Sean McVay as he went on to become a very, very young NFL head coach, and that's all people could talk about. I feel like, I don't know if this is just as time has gone on, if history's forgotten, but I feel like people forget how young Coach Ford was when he accomplished everything he accomplished here.
Yeah, so he's still the youngest coach ever to win the national championship at 33 years old. And, one other thing, he's the second youngest coach ever to beat Notre Dame in Notre Dame Stadium, because that was actually a couple years before in 1979. So, his resume was pretty considerable from the time he started. But yeah, there's some complementary aspects on the resume between Dabo and Danny. Obviously, Alabama, but being successful in their youth and not having really been a coordinator before they started either. Coach Ford really wasn't considered the coordinator, although I don't know that anybody had the title in 1981. But pretty much he was. He was kind of like Dabo in that he had recruited a lot of the players and was very popular with the guys who were on the team. And Bill McClellan recognized that when he elevated Coach Ford to the position. And that's another thing they have in common, that Coach Sweeney was elevated from the staff to the position.
So over 40 years, there's no shortage of critical, important, memorable moments that you've been a part of. But I have to imagine there is none more important than what happened on October 13th of 2008. What were your memories of that day, and did you have any clue at all of the chain of events that it would set off in Clemson history?
I had a clue that what happened that day might happen, but didn't have a clue that Dabo would have the incredible success that he is had. So to tell that story, you have to go back to the Thursday night before when we had lost to Wake Forest in a real tough defensive struggle, a game that C.J. Spiller was hurt, and we certainly missed him. But Wake Forest had a really good team. As I remember, there were like 31 NFL, because it was a Thursday night game, there were no other games,
right,
and all the scouts could go to other games in the Carolinas the next day. But I want to see if there were 31 scouts in the press box for that game, most I can ever remember, for a game. So we lose the game 12-7, so the next day, Terry Don Phillips came into my office, and he would talk to me about things that were going on or run things by me or whatever. And in that discussion, he said to me that, Tommy's been here 10 years. I think he deserves to know how he stands. And at this point, we were 3-3. I think we were 1-2 in the conference. And so he said, I really think that at this point in time, his 10th season, that we should win the Atlantic Division. And he basically told me if we didn't win the Atlantic Division, he was going to make a change at the end of the year. And he kind of said, I feel like I need to tell him that we owe him that after being here for 10 years. So I kind of thought that was interesting. And I also thought if he's going to do that soon, either today, the next day, or Monday, I'm kind of had an idea how Coach Bowden might react, because I was pretty close to Coach Bowden. So anyway, that Monday morning, that's what happened. Coach Bowden had a meeting with Terry Don Phillips, and people, a lot of the media will look and say, well, when he fired Coach Bowden, he didn't fire Coach Bowden. He basically told him what I just told you. He said, I want you to keep coaching and win every game that you can, but if we don't win the Atlantic Division, at least get to the ACC Championship, I'm going to make a change. Well, Coach Bowden's reaction was probably not what Terry Don thought it was going to be. He probably thought that Tommy was going to, bow up, but that was not his reaction. I think he just felt, well, maybe you should make a change now. And they both seem to have Dabo on their mind as the guy to give a shot to, and that's what ended up happening in the meeting. So at 9:30, Coach Bowden called me. He said, Tim, why don't you come down to my office for a second? So I went down there, and he said, he started out with saying, Tim, I'm not going to be the coach after today, and I know you'll need to write some things up, I think is the way he put it. And so he said, I've got one more final meeting with Terry Don in a half hour, whatever, but this is what I think is going to happen. So he gave me that heads up, and so then we ended up putting out a release that Tommy was not going to be the coach and that Dabo was going to be the interim coach. And then so I went from dealing with Coach Bowden to all of a sudden I think I went to Dabo. I didn't even wait for him to call me. I just went straight to Dabo, and we had a good long discussion about how we were going to handle that particular day.
Yeah.
And we ended up that he was going to have a meeting with the team before practice, and then he was smart enough to know that he needed to meet with the media afterwards. And Terry Don had given him the orders, or so to speak, to coach his team as you're going to be the head coach and make any changes or whatever you want to do. And so he ended up meeting with the media afterwards, and that's when he first said the words "all in."
Yeah.
And that he wanted whoever players are going to be there to be all in. Those players didn't owe him anything, and that they could leave if they wanted to. But if you're going to be at practice, we're going to be all in.
Anderson Metal Roofing and Shingles is a third-generation family-owned small business. Anderson Metal Roofing and Shingles brings over 40 years of experience delivering top-quality roofing for homes, businesses, and solar installs. They bring the craftsmanship in-house, with every roof built with precision and safety, earning them a hard-fought A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. When the storm hits, the heat rises, or your roof needs a champion, Anderson Metal Roofing and Shingles has your back. Check them out today at andersonmetalroofing.com. Some of the things I love about that press conference, the two of you sitting up there together in what looks like McFadden, I believe.
It was McFadden, yeah.
You know, I think about it, and it's a testament to longevity too, where he's making this poker analogy of All In at the time. And the World Series of Poker was going bananas as like as a cultural phenomenon. Yeah. But the other part of it, you go back and watch the video of his introductory press conference, and the aspect ratio is 4:3 with the like bars on the side for WIFF and the other outlets, because high def had not been like fully adopted.
Right.
At that, like. That's how long he's been the head coach here and had success here, which I just think is fascinating.
Yeah, it is amazing, and so we lost that first game, and then got his first win at Boston College, and that was really a big win because Boston College played in the ACC championship game that year in 2008, but they were a really good team, so that was a very big win. And C.J. Spiller came back for that game. He did not play against Georgia Tech, but that was certainly a very important game in Clemson history. And then, of course, December 1, we had the press conference, and now he was going to be the coach going forward, and we've gone from there.
Well, I have a feeling the name you just said probably makes this list, but you've promoted a list of just extraordinary, unbelievable, decorated players. Who are players that stand out to you from your tenure, both on the field and personalities off the field, who they were and your media obligations? I mean, when you think about 40 years of Clemson football specifically, who are some of the names that just immediately come to mind?
Yeah, well, when I first came here, you know, we did promote Steve Fuller for the Heisman Trophy my first year, and he had been an academic All-American, the first team academic All-American the previous year, and had really been the mainstay of what was a transitional season to greatness for Clemson. And he was, I think he had a 3.9 GPA for his career, very sharp. So he was a guy that you could really put at the front of the program, and that was, he was never. We ran the ball too much for him ever to be a quarterback who was going to have great Heisman type of stats, but there was just a great benefit to promoting him in general and making him the face of the program because he was just so sharp and so respected. So he's certainly my first year as a guy that would be up there. Now Perry Tuttle and Jeff Davis would certainly be on the list. Because they were had great such personalities. Jeff Davis was one of the all-time great leaders of a Clemson team in history. Perry Tuttle had this incredible personality, the type of guy that I remember before the Orange Bowl, Channel 7 did a feature about the team going to Highlight, and they just let Perry host it. They gave him the microphone, and he interviewed players, and so they were two, terrific, representatives, certainly for the, for the program, just further going on. And then in the 1980s, William Perry was, we did the first growth poster for him in 1984. And he just, captured the country in his personality. We really did a lot with him because, we were on probation over a 3-year period. In fact, his last 3 years. So we did a lot with him, just as much to try to still bring attention to the program. While we couldn't go to a bowl game, and it was going to be tough to win a national championship being on probation, but. He certainly was one of my favorites, and then into the 90s with Brian Dawkins. What a great certainly leader he was, and just jumping forward to guys like Robert Carswell, who was an All-American that pops into my mind here just off the top of my head. And then, CJ certainly would be up there. We decided to resurrect the growth poster for him. It was a 25-year anniversary of doing the William Perry poster, so that all kind of seemed as a natural. It was old school. Now you didn't have the use of social media. I mean, you had social media in 2009, but it's still
not as ubiquitous.
Right, and it was still benefits to sending those posters to newsrooms, and they were putting it up in there, and it led to a lot of national features on him. And he did end up 6th in the Heisman Trophy race, and on a team that lost 5 games. So we thought we certainly did some good for CJ.
You mentioned William Perry, and he is responsible for one of my favorite statistical anomalies in Clemson history, and that is his punt return. Can you tell us about William Perry's punt return?
And I guess this is still the rule today, but punt return yardage. If you block a punt and recover it, you get the yardage on the return. So I believe this was the only time that William Perry was on the punt return team, and he's on the punt return team because we expected Wake Forest to go for it on 4th down. So they put in their punter Newsom, and they snapped the ball to him, and they didn't fake it. And so they decided to punt it. Well, William had such a charge to him with such strength. He went right up the middle. He blocked the up back into the punter, Harry Newsom, and actually William never touched the ball. He blocked he hoisted the up back with such force that Harry Newsom blocked it, punted it off the backside of his up back, and then the ball carried 36 yards downfield from the line of scrimmage, and William recovered it. So we kind of talked about it in the press box and said he should get all the punt return yardage. I mean, even though he didn't touch the ball, he was responsible for the block punt. So he's definitely probably has the hardest punt return average in Clemson history because that was the only one he did.
Yeah, so anybody that looks through those numbers like we do, it's not a mistake.
No, it's not a mistake. Yeah.
Not a mistake. This is someone you talked about earlier, but I want to talk about the legacy of this position, and some of this is a little self-serving, having followed in your footsteps. But as I tell others about this position and about how great media relations is woven into the fabric of Clemson University, Clemson football, and its DNA, it's not a coincidence that Bob Bradley's name is up on the stadium and helping put this place, this university, this area on the national map, and the football program's role in that as aided by Sports Information, as it was known at the time. I mean, how much pride did you take in following in the legacy of Bob Bradley?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. And one of my happiest days was in the 2005 Miami game when he was inducted into the Clemson Ring of Honor. And I've been the chairman of the Ring of Honor committee since 1994. And I remember the meeting we had before in the summer of 2005 to look at the candidates. And we were sitting around in the room, and I do remember Dwight Rainey, a very respected administrator who was on the committee. He said, "Well, as I look at this list, to me, the only person who deserves to be in the Ring of Honor is Bob Bradley." I don't remember who the other candidates were at the time, but that everybody, and then when he said that, everybody kind of, you're right. And so he just did so much for the institution in general, just the way he treated the media or anybody. I mean, there's so many famous stories about him just going the extra mile for writers, whether it be fixing flat tires or giving them rides to different events or whatever. I remember the story that we used to have a Cub Scout day. And so there was a game where he went down and he did the post-game interview with Coach Howard, and he came up and there was a little boy sitting outside the press box, and he went up to him, and like everybody in the stadium was gone, and somehow the group of people that had taken this little boy to the game for Cub Scout Day had left him by mistake. They thought, I mean, they took like 10 kids and they thought he was in the car, and he wasn't. And so Mr. Bradley, of course, called the police and totally, I mean, he just went the extra mile to track down this kid's parents, and then he arranged to call the Clemson Police Department. They had a policeman actually drive the kid all the way home. So I don't know, it's one of my all-time favorite stories about him, as far as the impact he's had just on the program. And what we think about the traditions of Clemson. I tell people that if you're a Clemson fan, you think about running down the hill and all the traditions and all the great players that Clemson had and the Frank Howard stories. How do you know about those stories? You know about those stories because of Bob Bradley, because he's the one who shared them either with the media or our own publications or whatever. And the one that's the most forefront would be, Brent Musburger's running down the hill, the most exciting 25 seconds in college football. Well, that story he actually never said on the air. That story was a result of the Friday before the 1985 Georgia game, when Brent Musburger was doing the game, and he asked Mr. Bradley about the tradition, how it came about, and that's when it just came to Brent's mind, well, that's the most exciting 25 seconds in college football. And so I was there and heard it, and it was just me and Mr. Bradley and Brent, but it was Bob's genius to tell that story to Dan Foster and all the anybody he could tell it to, and then we put it in the press guide, a story about running down the hill, the next year. But it was his genius that got that story out there, and why it's such a revered, and it has added so much to the tradition.
And never said on the air by Brent Musburger until 2013, right?
2013, that's correct. So, 2013, they decided to, Bill Bunnell, the producer of ABC's Saturday Night Football, they were coming for the Georgia game, and it was the season opener, and he decided he wanted to really do a blowout of the tradition. And so as he was preparing in the summer, he called me one day and he says, Tim, when did Brent Musburger say this? We've gone through all this video and we can't find any video of him saying it on the air. And I said, that's because he didn't. And then I told him the story. And so then it was his genius to say, well, let's work it so that he not only says it on the air, but we pipe it into the stadium. Yeah. And so if you watch the video that's on YouTube now of the 2013 opening, it's the best documentary on the running down the hill that I can remember.
So we've got to take a second to open up the mailbag presented by the South Carolina Department of Social Services. Learn more about public adoption in the state of South Carolina by visiting dss.sc.gov. And Tim, you are well known for what's just become known as Tim Bourret stats, right? Just fun facts and nuggets. So what is your favorite Tim Bourret stat you've ever researched?
Well, probably the one that got the most attention was in the 1980s. I put a stat in the notes. We were kind of in the, I think it was 1985. It was in the late 80s. So Coach Ford was coaching. We were having a good year. But it occurred to me that in years that his wife was going to have a baby, we struggled. So I looked it up, and years that that Deborah was going to have a baby, we were like a 500 team, and all the other years that they weren't, we won like 89% of the games. So that really got a lot of life. It got a lot of picked up. I remember the Atlanta Constitution, running with it, and so we had a lot of fun. And Coach Ford gave me a lot of abuse about it too, saying I was trying to influence his lifestyle. So anyway, but I got a kick out of it too. Yesterday, I guess. His son was involved in a primary, running for a public office. That's how many years it's been.
That's amazing. I think back to my previous employer, too, where they had the rule named after the team where the last home game before every presidential election for a span of like 12 or 14 consecutive elections. If Washington won that last home game, the incumbent won, or if they lost, the challenger won, and it held up for like 12 straight elections. Unbelievable. It's one of the small perks and joys of the job we occupy.
Absolutely.
And then the other one, there are many, I'm sure, and you talk about Brent Musburger on the air, but if you had to take, I'm not going to make you take one, but if you had to take 2 or 3 memorable television or radio calls made by broadcasters in your career, which 2 or 3 immediately come to mind?
Well, I one that's pops into my mind is a game I was actually on the broadcast with, and I know this is off of football, but obviously I've worked with all the sports here. But when Greg Buckner had a dunk to beat North Carolina with 0.6 seconds left, Jim Phillips's call of that dunk certainly will always be in my mind. And the other one is also David Treadwell's 46-yard field goal to beat Georgia in 1986. I was actually on the call of that game with him. Also, that was an era in the 80s, which I got to do broadcast. So those are the first 2 that certainly pop into my mind. More recent years would certainly be Chris Fowler's call of the touchdown pass from Deshaun Watson to Hunter Renfrow. And Sean McDonald's actual radio call is very good on that one. If you want to Google that someday. So that's both of those calls, and it was just And you talked about going 35 years in between national championships. For me, that was not only just to end the 35-year streak, but the way it was done and on a play with 1 second left was certainly memorable.
Well, and Sean's got no shortage of great ones, even in regular season contests over the years.
Yes, for us and for just about everybody else. He does a remarkable job. I'd say he used to do a lot of basketball too, but now he's kind of the number 1 hockey guy also for ESPN.
Well, this is fitting. You mentioned Greg Buckner and Clemson radio for basketball. This is understandably a Clemson football podcast, but we can't have the color analyst of Clemson men's basketball in the room for the Clemson Athletic Network and not talk a little bit about basketball. And we talked about Brad Brownell. You think about the room he walked into as a first-year head coach at Clemson, among the rest of the ACC coaches. He's now the dean of ACC men's basketball coaches. I want to say it's 98 wins over the last 4 years,
correct,
which is I think second in the ACC. Elite Eight appearance a couple of years ago. I mean, you've seen a lot of Clemson basketball. Can you just put in context for us what they're doing presently and just the run that they've been on and the success that Coach Brownell and this program has enjoyed in recent years?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, by far the most wins in a 4-year period. Because we always used to look at that as a 4-year class, that you had all the same players, and nobody has the same players anymore for 4 years, except, God bless, Dylan Hunter. Yeah. He was here for all of them. But yeah, it is. Has been a terrific run, and I don't know that I've seen a coach that has just had to roll with the flow and adapt to the changes of college athletics like he's been able to do. And I'd see so many similarities between Dabo and Brad when it comes to just the culture of the program and caring about the student athletes overall and what they're going to do after they leave. So it's been great to see. It is interesting. I did a little bit of research that Dabo and Brad, they're the only Division I coaches currently who are first in career wins at their respective schools at the institutions at the same time, which is pretty amazing. And I certainly love to throw some positive towards our late athletic director, Terry Don Phillips, who hired both of them. So I'm pretty sure there's not an athletic director who's hired two of their winningest, even if you go back a number of years that hired both of those coaches. So he was certainly an important person in my career at Clemson, and we certainly miss him. But yeah, very excited about what the basketball team has done and the direction that it's headed. I think we have a real talented roster coming up for next year.
Well, you kind of stole my transition out of my mouth a little bit, but I'm glad you did, because as you think about Coach Sweeney as the winningest coach in Clemson football history, Coach Brownell, the winningest coach in Clemson men's basketball history, Mike Noonan, multi-time national championship winner for men's soccer. Obviously, the Clemson space was rocked a little bit by the passing of Terry Don. Can you just share kind of, obviously we see the success his hires have had and what Clemson has gone on to do, but can you just share a little bit about Terry Don, the person, and who he was?
Yeah, I want to add Eddie Radwanski to that list too. He's the winningest coach in women's soccer history, so he actually hired
a College Cup appearance.
Cup appearance too, yeah. Terry Don from the get-go, I remember the people that were on the committee that hired him said, well, when you meet him, you will feel that you've been visited, meaning that he's going to look you right in the eye, and he's going to care about what you do, and from the get-go. So he was just a person who was brilliant. I mean, he had 3 degrees. He had a law degree. He had a master's degree. He actually, before you got here, he used to teach a class, and I could never figure out how he had time to do that. It was a law-based class, as I remember. So, but he was a guy that always was involved in all the programs. He met with the coaches in all the sports constantly, and did what he could within the ramifications of what the budget was for each sport. And, as a result, did a lot of good. Other coaches, I think, today would swear by him. Obviously, I wrote the obituary for ClemsonTigers.com, and talking to those coaches and how much he meant to them, and how much he stood behind them and supported their programs was certainly, very important.
Well, Tim, we could probably do a 30-part series and not run out of topics to talk about, and maybe if the people demand that, maybe we'll circle back on it. But for decades, you've had a platform to reach Clemson fans, whether it's through the media or through the radio or through Twitter, whatever it may be. You've got the platform again. Is there anything you'd like to say to fans of Clemson football, Clemson athletics?
Yeah, I would just say that, when I came here in 1978, like a lot of people, I was 22 years old, and I said, okay, this is really a good place. But I never dreamed that I would be here for 49 years. I actually accepted a job at the University of Pittsburgh in 1983 to be the SID, and I never have physically moved up there to start. But I got so sick about just leaving Clemson. I lost 27 pounds in a month, and I just said, I finally talked to Roger Valdesari at Notre Dame about it, who had done the same thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he said, think about it, you just like Clemson, and that's where you want to be. You love the people there. They treat you well, and you should just stay there. And he said, I know you're going to make the people at Pittsburgh mad, but you if that's the way you feel and you're sick about it, then you need to stay at Clemson. And so obviously I did, and I've enjoyed being with the people here from the get-go, and I'm fortunate to have a career that goes back to Dr. Edwards, and my first year was his last year as the president. And Frank Howard, I got to know Frank Howard and hear all of his stories, and learned so much about the history of Clemson. And then, working with Bob Bradley certainly was just certainly a joy. So I've been very fortunate, and as I said earlier, it goes back to where God works in mysterious ways, that I got to make a trip to Clemson when I was at Notre Dame was just a fluke, and it was just an amazing opportunity. Really allowed me to see Clemson at its best.
Well, for those of us who have worked with you directly or indirectly, or benefited from the work you did directly or indirectly, we owe Roger Valdesari a debt of gratitude that you were not a Pitt Panther come the 1980s.
Well, thank you very much.
Well, Tim, thank you for being here. That's going to wrap us up here from Studio C of the Clemson Athletics Branding Institute. Make sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode of Two Right Turns.